Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Jack the Ripper's Letters. Jack the Ripper was one of the most horrendous serial killers in history, and one of the only Victorian serial killers to be remembered and popularized all these years later. There is one piece of the puzzle, however, that most people don't know about. An analysis of two letters allegedly written by Jack the Ripper to the press, in fact, the very letters that gave him his notorious name, were likely fabricated by journalists to boost newspaper sales. Yes, Jack the Ripper really did kill 5 sex workers between August and November in the year 1888. That aspect was never faked, as that would be something even too gruesome for newspaper executives to order. Instead, the forbidden part of Jack's history is in a letter and a postcard allegedly received by the Central News Agency. The letter was received by the agency on September 27th, with the postcard coming 4 days later. The letter was the very first time in which the actual name Jack the Ripper was used. In fact, these two single documents are responsible for our version of Jack. They created the character that would go on to terrorize the imaginations of many for over 100 years. But forensic linguist Dr. Andrea Nini has proved that the letters weren't written by the killer. She recently searched for similarities between 209 letters sent to both the police and newspapers in the years around the murders. She found that all of these letters, including the ones allegedly sent from Jack the Ripper, were written by a single author. The use of the same phrases, the same wording, and the same handwriting has proven that Jack never reached out to the police or the press. He was a complete anomaly who killed 5 women and then vanished. But everything we think of him is all thanks to some news reporter who was looking to drum up business for his failing paper by faking correspondence. Number 9. The true story of Cleopatras Son. While Cleopatra and Caesar are pretty well-known historical figures, most people forget all about their mysterious love child, Caesarion. His history has been largely forgotten because he didn't make it. Cleopatra, or more accurately, Cleopatra VII, was the very last pharaoh of Egypt. At 18 years old, she married her 10-year-old brother, after which a civil war broke out between them, and she was forced to flee to Syria. She then met Julius Caesar, the emperor of Rome, and enlisted his help. After she and Caesar defeated her brother/husband, Ptolemy XIII, she married her other brother, Ptolemy XIV, and continued to have an affair with Caesar. And this was how Caesarion was born. It was a tumultuous time, and most people don't know all of this happened when looking back at the lovely Cleopatra. Cleopatra made her son co-ruler at the young age of 3. Biologically, he was the rightful heir of the entire Kingdom of Egypt and the whole Roman Empire. He should have been the ruler of the biggest kingdom in the world and the oldest civilization in the Mediterranean. But for whatever reason, Caesar had already declared his nephew and adopted son Octavian to be his heir, and there was no way that Romans would allow an Egyptian child to rule them. There are rumors that he was trying to change his will, but Caesar was killed before that could happen. The Romans apparently grew tired of his obsession with Egypt. In 31 BC, Gaius Octavius invaded Egypt and slaughtered Caesarion to keep him from taking the throne away from him. Using Cleopatra's own strategy, he eliminated all of the nearest threats to his power. Did you know that Caesar and Cleopatra had a child together? Or that he ruled at all, even briefly? Let me know in the comments. Number 8. The Giants of Sardinia. There is a secret history in Sardinia that most people are wholly unaware of, and it has to do with giants. Beyond the crystal clear waters of Sardinia's coastline, past the golden beaches and beneath the sun's rays, the earth kept something hidden. This secret was revealed only a few decades ago in 1974. That's when the broken fragments of the giants of Monte Prama were found. Approximately 38 statues of giant stone figures were discovered broken into pieces in Monte Prama. It took nearly 40 years of work for archaeologists to reassemble the statues piece by piece, finally restoring them to their former glory. All the statues have since been put in the National Archaeological Museum in Cagliari, where they can be seen today. But there is quite a bit of mystery still surrounding the statues. No one has any idea who exactly built the giants or what their purpose was. There have been a few different interpretations of their identity. Some say they come from the Nuragic civilization of around 900 BC. That would make them around 3,000 years old, and some of the biggest statues ever carved in the Mediterranean. But it's impossible to say what they were meant to depict. Some experts even suggest they were to be copies of giant, mysterious, human-like figures that visited the region. Nothing else like them has ever been found on Earth. What do you think these giant statues were supposed to be? Let me know in the comments below. Number 7. The sunken city of the Caribbean. The lost city of Atlantis may just be hidden off the coast of the Caribbean, specifically off the coast of Cuba. A team of underwater explorers from Canada recently spent years mapping the ocean floor in the area around the Caribbean. While exploring, their sonar equipment detected a bewildering number of stone structures over 1,800 feet beneath the surface of the water. They found formations that appear to be geometric shapes, perhaps carved by human hands. Some of these blocks are smooth, some even appear to look like pyramids, and all of them are grouped in such a way to suggest a sunken city. The company responsible for these findings is Advanced Digital Communications, but what's really crazy is that after they came forward with what they found, almost all information about it has vanished. There was news of it very briefly, then nothing. This has prompted some people to suggest discoveries of this nature, ones so shocking they could change what we know about the history of humanity, are being kept secret from society on purpose. Geologist Manuel Iturralde is someone who has seen the structures, even calling them extremely peculiar, and he's the director of research at the Natural History Museum in Cuba. It seems there is no doubt to the authenticity of the underwater structures. But whether this is the lost city of Atlantis, the ruins of a different lost civilization, or something else entirely, well, we just don't know. Number 6. The truth of the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is considered by some to be the greatest artifact in the world, but does it even exist? The general story of the Grail is that it was the very cup Jesus drank wine out of at the Last Supper. It was also the same cup that Joseph of Arimathea later used to catch Jesus' blood when he was nailed to the cross. But it vanished after Joseph took the cup to England. At least that's how the story goes. But here's where things get extremely upsetting for a lot of people. The hard truth is that in the actual Bible, there is no Holy Grail. The Gospels simply mention that Jesus did indeed use a cup at the Last Supper, but there was no attention given to it. Everything most of us think we know about the Holy Grail was invented years later in the Middle Ages. It wasn't until the 12th century, 1,200 years after Jesus died, that the story I told you came into existence. A magical grail was first spoken of in a poem by the writer Chrétien. Some years later, the so-called magical grail that he described turned into a holy chalice of Christ, and from here the story was born. Essentially, the forbidden history of the Holy Grail is the likelihood that it never actually existed, and that the legend was fabricated in a poem 800 years ago. What do you think? Do you think the Holy Grail actually existed in one form or another? Let me know in the comments below. Number 5. Secrets of the Dead Sea Scrolls. There are still some forbidden secrets hidden in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You've no doubt heard of the scrolls before, but let me give you a brief bit of history on where they came from. In the year 70, the Romans had just conquered Judea after a Jewish revolt that started 4 years earlier. The Roman army marched through the province of Judea, located where Israel and Palestine can be found today, and extinguished every Jewish community. They also sacked Jerusalem, massacred thousands of people, tore down the Temple of Jerusalem, and looted and carried off anything deemed valuable. During this period of chaos, in which Romans stole as many religious texts as they could find, there was a group of Jews hiding near the Dead Sea in a series of caves. They wrote hundreds and hundreds of different texts on scrolls and then protected them in sealed clay jars to keep them out of the hands of the Romans. These were what we know of today as the Dead Sea Scrolls, originally found by a couple of sheep herders back in 1947. These scrolls contain almost the entire Jewish Bible. They contain part of the Old Testament and many other Jewish religious writings. The caves in which the scrolls were found had probably been used as a secret storage place for years, even before the Romans came to destroy everything. But not everything on the scrolls has been decoded just yet. Even all these years later, scientists are still struggling to transcribe all the mysterious stories written on the papyrus. Number 4. The Loristan bronzes. The mystery of the Loristan bronzes is still puzzling archaeologists. These bronze figurines are artifacts from the Iron Age that were found in the Zagros Mountains of Iran. They initially captured the attention of the world in the 1930s, but were then forgotten. 90 years later, experts are still trying to figure out who made these completely bizarre figures. The Loristan bronzes were first found by a farmer in his fields in 1928. The farmer dug as many artifacts as he could out of his field and started selling them to local dealers. Word spread quickly, and before anyone could stop it, most of the artifacts had already been hoarded by museums or gobbled up by private collectors. It wasn't until 10 years later that the looting stopped and Western archaeologists moved in to do research in the area. German archaeologist Erich Schmidt was the first to take this seriously in 1938. He discovered plenty of artifacts the looters missed, even digging down into multi-chambered structures beneath ancient temples and palaces of worship. But in the end, we still don't know who built the bronze figures. The most recent estimates place them at being from the 11th century BC. They may have been made by the Cimmerians, a nomadic society from Russia. Not the Sumerians, but the Cimmerians. But we just don't know. We also don't know what in the world most of the bizarre creatures depicted by the figurines are supposed to be. Number 3. The Crown of Thorns. When the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris burned in April of 2019, firefighters fought desperately to save the relics hidden inside. One of them was priceless, a relic of holy proportions unlike anything else in the world. This is the Crown of Thorns, the one placed on the head of Jesus during the crucifixion. It apparently had survived the days of the events depicted in the Bible and was housed in Notre Dame. The Crown of Thorns is described clearly in the Bible, but the Bible doesn't actually say what happened to it after the crucifixion. The relic didn't resurface until the year 409, when St. Paulinus of Nola wrote of its existence. In 530, the crown was mentioned again as being housed at the Basilica of Mount Zion in Jerusalem. This is confirmed yet again in 570 and once more in 870. The crown was such a popular item, and the thorns considered so holy, that most of them were actually plucked from the artifact and then given to important people in Europe, like the Emperor Charlemagne. These themselves also became relics. The crown eventually moved to Constantinople around the year 1063. Records show it was housed there until 1238, then handed to King Louis IX of France, and it has stayed in France ever since. What's really remarkable about this piece of history is that we actually know every move it made since roughly the year 500. What we don't know is if the crown is real or where in the world it was between the crucifixion and showing up in Jerusalem. What do you think? Is the Crown of Thorns the legitimate article or something else? Tell me your theories in the comments. Number 2. Ships over Rome. In the year 218 BC, a massive fleet of ships from outer space were witnessed in the sky over Rome. At least this is according to ancient writers who detailed what seems to be an instance of mass hysteria. We may think of UFO sightings as being a relatively modern invention, circa Roswell in the 1940s, but the truth is much weirder. Famous historian Pliny the Elder wrote in 76 BC that the flame of a star's fire was seen in the sky before ascending back to heaven and transforming into light. In other words, a mysterious craft like a fireball came down from the sky, hovered in the heavens, and then vanished back into space. It happened as also detailed by Plutarch of Chaeronea in 74 BC, just before a great battle. He described the large object as appearing before the two armies in flame, roughly the shape of a wine vessel and of a silver color. As far as we know, these are the first accounts of unidentified flying objects in history, made around 2,000 years ago. Number 1. The Valley of the Dawn. In Brazil, followers of the rather bizarre religion of Vale do Amanhecer, or the Valley of the Dawn, have some pretty strange beliefs regarding history. These people live in what looks like a small theme park built in the satellite city of Brasilia called Planaltina. They have a temple complex in the shape of a pyramid, a temple that looks like a spaceship, and a center for praying shaped like a six-pointed star. On the outside, they look kind of like a cult, but their beliefs consist of various doctrines seen throughout history, from Christianity, Judaism, the ancient Inca, to even the Egyptians. Here's the forbidden piece of history that really makes them strange. The Valley of the Dawn followers believe that extraterrestrial beings landed on our planet 32,000 years ago, and that their goal was to advance our civilizations. The beings have since returned to Earth periodically to help guide us. Either this is a piece of ancient history that the rest of us are ignorant about, or these people have been horribly misled. Either way, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!